This is the podcast of Calvary Baptist Church and anybody out there that's interested in local church life. And today we're going to listen in on a conversation between our pastor and another pastor, Ethan Jago. And so just interested in what happened at the Southern Baptist Convention. And so take a listen.
Got a special guest, friend of mine, Ethan Jago, pastor of Five Bridges Church, Panama City Beach. And Ethan and I are going to have a little conversation about the SBC this past week, what we saw, where things are going, what we think it portends for the future. So, Ethan, give me your spin on we saw the whole Mueller amendment, which, from my take, and he edited it down to absolutely the bare essentials. To me, it was inarguable, not controversial. While I was pleased that 3/4 of the messengers voted for it, I'm a little disconcerted that 1/4 didn't. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think the rationale was behind the 1/4 no votes?
Yeah, I want to give our brothers the benefit of the doubt here, and maybe this is just the optimistic side of me. But I believe that most of those individuals that voted against it, the 25%, the vote was, I actually have the numbers up here. The vote for it was 6,028 to 2,026. So it's roughly 25%. And I think a lot of them just don't understand, or they've cared to really talk through the reasons of what is this amendment going to do? Because when the Los Sanchez amendment, which I was a huge advocate for, was going around, there's a lot of confusion about that. They thought that there was going to be this police task force coming into your church, Paul. And if you have a woman as a children's director or anything else like that, you're going to get questioned and possibly removed from the convention. I think there's that margin of people, but then I do think that there is that other more left-leaning egalitarian viewpoint that women can and should serve in the role of pastor. And so I think that a lot of people feel like it is encroaching upon the autonomy of the local church, that the SBC is almost violating its own constitution of we're all autonomous churches cooperating together within the SBC. And I want to go out on a limb and say, I think a lot of it's probably just a misunderstanding, but I think there is probably a good amount of people too, though, within that who voted against it that are honestly would be in disagreement with us and the Baptist Faith and Message.
Yeah, I think you're being pretty gracious on that. Somebody asked me a question similar to that Sunday before church, and I was telling them, I said, man, I really don't know. But from the little snippets I read online, little things people put on Twitter or X and things I see on some different social media groups, I think there's a larger egalitarian group than we probably imagine. Hey, real quick on that, if you remember during the debate, as brief as it was, one of the pastors, I can't remember who it was, that got up and spoke in opposition to the amendment. You remember him saying that there are 0 cases of this across the SBC? I mean, he said it 3 or 4 times. There are 0 cases. This is a non-issue. Man, that's just not true. The data does not show that.
No, it's not true at all. Just in going into, before I became a pastor here, I went with the Send Network to San Francisco to consider and possibly pray about planting a church in San Francisco, the Bay Area. And as I was there and we were going to some of these churches, I went to their websites and I saw them listing husband, wife, co-pastoring together. And I remember bringing that up to the Send City missionary, and he was very upset that they did that. So he was like, yeah, I don't know why they're doing that. And, we've told them they got to take it down. But okay, so you take it down, but then they're still going to be functioning and operating in that role. No, there is a lot of churches. I have a list that I'm not going to say I got from who or anything else, that shows a lot of churches in question. It needs to be verified. And then we had that documentary come out that John Harris had put out that, just shows you some of these churches. So no, I don't think that there's 0. I think there is more churches than we would even know where they're allowing women to serve in a position that they should not, that scripture does not give them the authority to serve in. And the problem that I don't think some of these guys who are allowing them to serve in those, that are allowing women to serve in those areas, I don't think that they're realizing they're causing these women to sin. These men who are supposed to be the shepherds and protectors of their people are now allowing women to step into a role in a position that they should not be serving in. So yeah, I think there's a lot of churches. I think 0 is a ridiculous statement.
Yeah, I was surprised that wasn't refuted. really there wasn't much time, but I was surprised that was a pretty audacious claim that didn't get any pushback.
Very audacious.
Hey, real quick for the people listening that really aren't familiar, maybe they've just read, some headline clips here and there, Christian Post or whatever they're reading, picking up on this. Can you give a quick synopsis of what the Mueller Amendment actually proposes, what it does, and what it doesn't do? Clear up some information on it.
So the Baptist Faith and Message states that the role of pastor, elder, overseer is reserved distinctly for men as qualified by Scripture. So it's very clear in there, but it's obviously not, because a lot of this has been blurred together. And so what it is, I'm pulling up the amendment right now here, just so I can read it here. Mueller is trying to, I guess you could say, take some of the gray area out of it. So the amendment, I just had it. Okay. It adds a sixth item to Article 3 of our Constitution, and it states that a cooperating Southern Baptist church does not act to affirm, appoint, or endorse a woman serving in the office or function of a pastor, elder, overseer, specifically preaching to the assembled congregation. So that's what the amendment says. And so what that is doing is it's taking the air out of the sails of these individuals who are allowing a woman in any capacity to step behind the pulpit on a Sunday morning or to the corporate gathering and to function as a pastor. And so when a woman gets up there and reads from Scripture, she's now taking an authoritative stance because the authority comes from Scripture. So when a woman gets up on a Sunday morning behind the pulpit and is even reading Scripture, I believe that is taking an authoritative stance. And so the Mueller Amendment is saying that, no, this is not okay. And it's taking what the Baptist Faith and Message says just one step further to even put more of a concentric circle around the protection of the office and function of pastor.
And don't you think, this is what I've shared with our people, don't you think that really the issue is about something bigger? It's about scriptural authority and how we're going to yield to scriptural authority or we not. Because to me, and I know I've seen some pushback of this online, but I think it is a slippery slope issue. If you concede on this point, where else will you concede and when? I think it's only a matter of time. So really, it's a biblical authority issue. It's not really certainly it's not an anti-woman amendment. But even on that score, like you mentioned something just a minute ago, Ethan, about these men are putting women in a position to sin because this is contrary to what Scripture says. And again, Paul's argument, which we don't have time to rehash all of the arguments for and against, but Paul's argument to Timothy is rooted in creation. It's not rooted in first century culture. It's rooted in God's design. So I forgot what I was going to say about that. A bigger issue in our churches, I think, Ethan, and this is probably a bigger discussion than for today, is really the growth of feminism. It's just sort of behind everything. That this is an outspring of this is a growth from out of that. So how we address that, I think, is a much bigger issue. The role of men, the role of leadership for men, the role of pastors leading. Ethan, in your church, what would you allow? Like you mentioned, not scripture reading. What roles can women play in public worship ministry?
Yeah, so in our worship team, we have women on the worship team. We have women playing instruments. We allow that. I would not allow a woman to pray from the pulpit because that is engaging and leading in the corporate body of worship. We would not allow a woman to read from Scripture in the corporate gathering on a Sunday morning. We allow women to teach kids. We allow women to teach other women. We just do not allow women to teach a mixed crowd. So a woman would never teach in a small group fellowship on a Sunday morning, like a Sunday school setting or anything else like that.
But for somebody listening to this who didn't agree with that interpretation of this, the Mueller Amendment really doesn't even touch that, really, does it? I mean, if the church decides you won't have someone reading Scripture, you won't have someone offering up a prayer, it's really not. That's not what this amendment is aimed at.
No, not at all. So, like, if your church decided that, a woman can go ahead and pray in front of the corporate body, that's your local church decision, and you would not be in violation or not be in friendly cooperation with the Baptist Faith and Message. Where it comes down to is specifically the role of exercising the office of pastor, even to the point too of being on a board of elders. It's just immediately closing the door that has always been closed to women, that they should never be in that. But it's not saying women can't serve in any capacity within the church.
And of course, this is not something new. This is not a departure from traditional Baptist ecclesiology. This is just a reinforcement, a restating of. So, Ethan, I'm guessing your wife didn't preach Sunday on Mother's Day.
No, goodness, no, absolutely not. Nor if she was even asked to, she would say, "I will never do that." A lot of the women in our church would be in the same way. They would be like, "That is something that I am not allowed to do," and nor are they seeking it, nor should they seek it.
And I think that's a bigger issue, and that comes from teaching, not seeking it.
Yeah,
this is not a contentious issue. Even one thing we've tried to do in this area, kind of generally that addresses this, we try to be really careful with titles, not to be legalistic, but because they confuse, I think, church members if you're not clear. And so, again, this is not specific to the Mueller Amendment. It addresses, as you said, very clearly pastoral authority, pastoral role, particularly preaching to the congregation, that sort of thing. But we don't use the term minister for women either, because I think, just our common vernacular, that's going to be conflated with being pastor. And so we just don't want that confusion there. So we have a preschool director who serves under our executive pastor. She's not an elder. As far as pastoral functions go, that I wouldn't include those in that. She doesn't teach the congregation. She doesn't do those sort of things. But so there's not confusion there. We don't call her our children's minister. She's a director. And we do the same thing, not just with women, we do the same thing with men who are not elders, who don't have a pastor preaching responsibility. So, we have someone that will say direct senior adult ministry, but he's not one of our elders. He's not on our elder council. But one thing we're just trying to do is just be really clear with how we use the term pastor elder. Does it really apply? Does the man in that position meet the criteria biblically, and are they exercising that function? So I don't know how you guys do that or what you think about that in your church as far as being specific with titles.
We're right there in step with you, brother. I have talked to some churches, some brothers that are right there with us in the faith who use the term minister behind a woman's title. And I asked them, why do you do that? And they told me that's what they were advised by their lawyer for legal counsel. That legally, that's why they use that, because if they leave or if there's a lawsuit or something, because it puts them in a specific status for legality issues. I've not really looked into that very deep, but I think within Southern Baptist culture, the word minister in a lot of places, especially where you have like a one head lead pastor, there's confusion is what I've been told, that when you have multiple men with the name pastor, there's confusion like, well, who's the pastor? And so then they use the term minister, which again, I think most people would see that word minister and would say, oh yeah, that's the same thing as a pastor. Yeah. So I think that is a slippery slope where if you start using that term, even though your definition of minister might mean something different than what other people assume it means, it's analogous in people's minds as to, oh no, minister equates to pastor. And so I just think it's good just to not use any of that kind of language for the sake of clarity and for the sake of the church. That way they're not nervous about, oh, do we have women serving as pastors because they've got the title minister? No. So it's just better just to take that out completely. So I agree with you.
Yeah, it's not a workaround. So give me your thoughts. What's your prognosis for Indianapolis then? So this amendment, in order to take effect, has to pass 2 times, 2/3 majority. We saw what happened with the law amendment, passed the first time, didn't the second time. So what are your thoughts heading into Indianapolis next year?
I'm skeptical. I'm very hopeful in Willie. I think Willie's going to do a great job advocating for this. And in one of his press conferences, he said that he is going to actively advocate for this. And I think that's going to have a lot of help for us. We were down in the Bible Belt. So if anything was going to get passed, this was the place in Orlando that it was going to get passed. It's not going to be down in the Southeast for quite some time because it's in Indianapolis next year. And then I think it's going to be in Austin or Houston, I think the following year.
Yeah, San Antonio, I think.
San Antonio.
St. Louis is coming up. I'm not sure the order of things, but
yeah,
Anaheim, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Salt Lake City. It's a while before it circles back.
I'm not sure. I really am not sure. I think there's a good chance we have to get it passed because whoever's in the SBC president, they're going to help put the right people in the right places and help make sure that they are very clear and explaining what this is and what this isn't, what this means and what it doesn't mean. And how is this going to affect the local church their autonomy? So I'm not sure, man. I'm very hopeful that 75% is probably going to remain steady and might dip a teeny bit, because it's just depending on how many churches and messengers feel adamantly and strongly about it, and who are going to make that trip up to Indianapolis. So I'm not sure.
And that's always been my take. My take has been, I had some discussion with somebody who disagreed with me. And I said, listen, man, this is not an issue of church autonomy. If your church wants to ordain a female pastor, you can. If you want to ordain two, if you want to ordain, homosexual pastor, you can do what you like. But as a convention of churches, we also can say, we don't want to have fellowship with you.
Yeah.
So it really, to me, is a matter of integrity. If you disagree fundamentally with this, I think the choice is clear. Join a denominational organization that fits your theology. I just think it's just a necessary statement right now in these shifting times. But to Justin's point, maybe there will be some that will just remove themselves over this.
Yeah, and I agree with Justin's point, because I already have heard of some churches saying, "Well, we're leaving," and in one aspect, it's like, well, it's sad, but at the same time, like, if they're not willing to be in friendly cooperation, meaning that they're going to adhere to the Baptist faith and message, because if your church states that you adhere to the Baptist faith and message, already the Baptist faith and message is clear on this. You don't believe everything that the Baptist faith and message says. Then, if you're putting women in a position that the Baptist faith and message says is not okay. So yeah, I mean, depending on how many of those churches do that, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, and to a point, I started drafting this up a few years ago at one of the conventions. I started to think, we have the Chicago Statement of Inerrancy, we have the Nashville Statement, we have the Danvers Statement, and so I've drafted a statement called the Emerald Coast Statement, that I will hopefully be putting out this week. That I'm going to be pushing out and sending, where it's essentially a confessional statement that when churches sign off on that, people know very clearly where do these churches stand on this issue. And so once that website goes live, I've got a website, everything, where people can go on, read through it, and then churches, elders, individual believers can sign this confessional statement saying, yes. And I have affirmations, I have denials, I have articles outlining a lot of the egalitarian arguments of women in ministry, like Deborah, the prophetesses in the New Testament, Unia, and everything else. Just so that way,
we're hearing over and over.
Exactly. And so, it's interesting, because a few years ago I was thinking, like, man, why do we really even need this? And then it was in Orlando, I started to think, well, why did we need a statement on biblical inerrancy? That should be a no-brainer. And so that's why I drafted this statement up, and it's going to be going out live soon, and I'll email it to you privately, and then I'll let you know when you can push it out publicly. But I think this is going to help a lot of churches and a lot of people who are looking for good doctrinal churches that are willing to adhere to the fidelity and the perspicuity of Scripture, that are going to say, yeah, we're going to sign that, because now you can sign, because in our statement of faith, it shows our church, hey, these are the confessions we adhere to, and we're also signers of these statements. So that way a church or a person looking at the church from the outside in can see, ooh, I see where they stand. And that way too, if people ask, well, why does your church not allow women in ministry? You can say, hey, read the Emerald Coast Statement, and you can see where we stand on this exact issue. So I think that's something that's necessary now. I think that's something that's needed, because this issue isn't going away. And so what we have to do is we've got to double down and draw a very hard line in the sand and be unwilling to waver and compromise on it.
What kind of feedback did you get from just like your network there around the Emerald Coast and pastors that Was it positive? You get mostly positive too?
No, sadly, there's some pastors in the Panhandle that I know are against this. They were totally against the Law Sanchez Amendment, and they're not for this amendment either. It's kind of split up here, which is kind of shocking, because we're in a very concerned. I mean, you guys are only a few hours north of us.
Yeah, just an hour and a half.
Yeah, and so it's shocking that even in this area, kind of that egalitarian drift. Even though I don't think any of these men would call themselves egalitarian by any stretch of the means, but by definition, they're at a minimum soft complementarian. So it's been mixed. It's been very mixed, because I had Willie Rice here, and I invited a lot of pastors to come and ask him. And there's some pastors, a pastor who was kind of against it and was asking Willie some really tough questions, and just said that, I've landed at a different interpretation on this. And I think that's where a lot of pastors are sadly landing, is that they interpret that passage differently. They interpret it more culturally to what Timothy was dealing with at Ephesus, rather than prescriptive, that this is timeless.
Yeah, that's tough on a lot of levels, Ethan, because it's not just method of hermeneutics here. It's looking at historical interpretation, what's orthodox, where have we stood for eons. I mean, so I really struggle with that. It's hard for me to be gracious with that interpretation, as if you're Southern Baptist or if you're Baptist, or
I agree.
If you're in the thread of us. I've mentioned Justin mentioned some of those people that might voluntarily remove themselves. But did you hear any feedback from the other side? Like, if this doesn't pass, if this doesn't get through, I'm not sure that we're going to remain in cooperation ourselves. Did you hear anything from the other side? Have you heard any churches, pastors saying that sort of thing?
Yeah, I did. There's a lot of people that said that if Willie doesn't get in, and if this amendment isn't going to go through, then they're going to seriously question, like, the analogy that I've heard, or the metaphor, has been that the SBC is a sinking ship, and that these are just small plug holes into that ship. And if these things don't get plugged, then we're probably going to seriously consider leaving. So yeah, I have heard that too, where and my encouragement to those brothers is like, man, like, I get it, but I don't think it's beyond saving right now. There's still so much good that the SBC is doing. I mean, it's the largest denomination in the world. Just looking at the missionaries we send and the churches that we can plant, and like the resources that we can share all together, I think it's worth fighting for. And if all good churches are not willing to stand and fight, then of course it's going to drift liberal, and of course it's going to drift to the left.
Yeah.
And so I always want to encourage guys to stay in.
Yeah, that's something I've struggled with, that idea over the years, which is different issues. But I tell you, somebody who's really influenced my thinking on that wrote a good article a couple weeks ago. I should have pulled it up before I called you, but Rod Martin wrote a really good article on that. Just the value of the SBC and the need to stay in. This is just a little anecdotal thing. We were doing a tour in Turkey, tour of the churches and that sort of thing, a biblical tour, and our guide there, our Christian guide in Turkey, said, you guys are the hope of the world, right? That's what do you mean? He said, American evangelical Christians are the hope of the world. And I said, well, talking to our people afterwards, if that's true, that's the way they perceive it, that's necessary. Obviously, we're not talking about, obviously, the gospel is the hope of the world, but the work of the true evangelical American Christian, then the heart of that's got to be Southern Baptist. I mean, at least we're not the only ones, but we're certainly necessary ones in that. So real quick before you go, Ethan, what can Willie, and I'm so glad he got elected too, but what can he reasonably hope to accomplish in 2 years?
Yeah. So this fall, I want to say it's around this fall, Willie's going to be appointing the different people into serving in these different committees and stuff like that, which I think is going to be very helpful as it relates to resolutions and other things based off of like all of the amendments that got brought forth to approve these items and to get the right people in the place. And so that's like truly the great power that we have in having a guy like Willie as the SBC president, is that he's going to exercise wisdom in putting the right people into those right leadership positions that are really behind the scenes, but are making a ton of the decisions that kind of affect every church within the SBC. So I'm very curious and anxious to see. I don't know exactly where he's going to be placing people or who's exactly up for those things. So just waiting for time. Probably this fall is when we'll start hearing some things coming out on who he's putting in.
Yeah, I'm very, very hopeful for what he's going to do. I think he's convictional, and I think he's pretty courageous too. I mean, he's bucked the tide on this with some people.
Yeah.
So,
and he's got his 7 pillars of Baptist renewal. If you guys haven't seen that, I would highly suggest anyone who hasn't looked at that, look at that, and you'll see kind of like his ethos of what he's looking to do. And man, I agree with every single one of those 7 things. Like Willie's the type of guy, like, if he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. He's not a politician in the sense of like, he's just going to say things to appease people to get elected and not follow through with it. So I'm very sure and very confident that he's going to be a man of his word.
Yeah. Well, Ethan, man, thanks for sharing some thoughts, some input on this stuff. It's good to have like-minded brothers out there, particularly those that are kind of neighbors. to us.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we got some Calvary folks that are going down to Five Bridges when they're there. You know, some of our folks have places down there. So somebody asked me the other day, said, man, do you know this guy? Do you know Ethan Jago? We go to his church when we're down there. Man, we love this guy. I said, yeah, I know him. So yeah, I'm glad you guys are going there.
Yeah, we got our conference coming up on June the 27th, Oxano. It's on the church this year. So my good friend and pastor, he pastors up in Canada, James Coates, he was arrested during the COVID years for not shutting down his church. And the conference is going to be around ecclesiology. What is the church? Why do we need the church? What is the purpose and the function of the church? What's the members' role in the church? And then there's going to be breakout sessions for men and women. So if anyone wants to come down to that, just let me know. And I've got free tickets for you and your elders if you guys want to come. It's going to be a great conference, and I'm very excited for it. And
I got registered the other day. I think I've got one other guy right now that's committed to go. So we may have a few others, but yeah,
awesome.
Some of us will be there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's going to be a great conference.
Good deal. Well, man, thanks, Ethan. And God bless you guys at Five Bridges. And just hope to hear good things. And hopefully within 2 years, you'll be first vice president or something.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I'll send you that link too, man. I'd love to get your eyes on it. I'm still working on making some slight edits, but I think it's going to be a very powerful statement, and it's very needed in this day and age that we live in.
Yeah, man. I hope that gets some traction. I hope that really will. Hope that'll get some good traction, because we need that.
I agree.
Okay, man. Well, you guys take care. Appreciate your time.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you.
All right. Thanks for listening to our podcast, Calvary Life. And as always, we are for God, for Dothan, and for the world.